It was discovered at that time Terry Bollea, also known as Hulk Hogan, was experiencing a serious medical-related issue.
When Hulk Hogan was found dead inside his Florida mansion, the world assumed it was simply the end of a wrestling legend. What happened next stunned everyone. Behind the official report of a heart attack, investigators began uncovering details that did not fit. A gym that looked untouched, a security system disabled from the inside, a hidden room sealed behind a basement wall, and a phone call 3 days earlier that left one of the most fearless men in sports visibly shaken. What the FBI found raised questions no one was expecting to ask. The morning that ended Hulkamania. On the morning of July 24, 2025, news broke from Clearwater, Florida that professional wrestling icon Hulk Hogan, born Terry Gene Bollea, had been found unresponsive inside his home. He was 71 years old. The first alert came through a frantic 911 call reporting cardiac arrest. Emergency responders arrived at the mansion and immediately began resuscitation efforts. Paramedics worked to restart his heart. Every attempt failed. At 11:17 in the morning, doctors at Morton Plant Hospital pronounced him dead. For fans around the world, it was an ending nobody had imagined for the man who had once represented power, resilience, and larger-than-life energy. Initial reports moved quickly. The medical examiner confirmed the cause of death as an acute myocardial infarction, a sudden catastrophic heart attack. The ruling was classified as natural. To most people, it seemed like the logical conclusion. Hogan was in his 70s. His body had endured decades of professional punishment, a lifetime of slamming giants in the ring, relentless travel, and more than 24 surgeries. The toll was well documented, but the story was more complicated than a simple heart failure. His medical history carried layers that sharpened the picture. Hogan had been quietly living with leukemia, a serious blood disorder, alongside atrial fibrillation, a condition where the heart beats erratically and unpredictably. Both conditions dramatically increased the risk of sudden cardiac arrest. They painted the picture of a man carrying serious, largely invisible battles behind the public image of someone still attending events and smiling for cameras. Even so, his passing did not settle neatly into a story of natural decline. He had been spotted training not long before his death. Friends described him as looking better than he had in years. His wife, Sky Daly, frequently noted that he had committed to meditation, clean eating, and daily workouts. He appeared to have found a kind of equilibrium in his later years, removed from the chaos that had defined so much of his earlier life. That made the abrupt ending harder to absorb. The police officers who first arrived at the mansion noticed more than just Hogan's body. Something about the scene struck them as unusual. Because of those observations, and because of who Hogan was, they determined the case required a closer look. The Clearwater Police Department conducted multiple witness interviews and gathered his medical records. While they accepted the medical examiner's conclusion, they also pointed to what they called the unique nature of the circumstances. This was not the passing of a private citizen. It was the death of one of the most recognizable athletes on the planet. And any unanswered question could quickly become something much larger. That decision brought in federal involvement. The FBI was quietly pulled into the investigation, not only to confirm the medical findings, but to review any irregularities at the scene. For a death officially ruled natural, that was not a standard step. It raised eyebrows immediately. Behind the flood of tributes and the official statements, a parallel story was already forming. One built on questions that refused to go away. Why was the scene described as unusual? Why did federal agents need to look deeper into what appeared to be a natural passing? And what did investigators actually find inside that mansion? The sterile gym and the silent alarms. When federal investigators entered Hulk Hogan's home, one of their first stops was the gym. This had been his sanctuary. Friends and family described it as the one space he never neglected, filled with weights, machines, and mementos from his career, a place he returned to even in his later years, committed to maintaining whatever physical strength he had left. On the morning of his death, the room looked nothing like a space anyone had recently used. The gym was almost unnaturally clean. Surfaces were polished. Weights were arranged in perfect order. The floor mats showed no sign of recent contact. No water bottles, no towels, none of the small traces that accumulate when someone actually trains. For a man whose daily routine reportedly included consistent workouts, the pristine condition of that room was immediately notable. Investigators observed that it looked less like an active training space and more like something that had been deliberately staged, cleaned, and arranged before emergency services were called. Attention shifted from the gym gym to the wider security of the house. Hogan had invested significantly in protecting his property. The system included multiple cameras, motion sensors, and backup protections designed to prevent tampering. He was known for being careful about his privacy. For investigators, the expectation was that detailed digital records would exist, logs of movement in and around the house in the hours before his death. What they found was something else entirely. The entire security system had been manually switched off from inside the property, not disrupted by a power failure, not shut down by a technical malfunction. Someone had gone to the control panel and disabled it deliberately. That finding mattered because it required knowledge of the system's layout and of the access codes needed to override it. At the same time, there were no signs of forced entry anywhere in the house. Doors and windows were undisturbed. Nothing suggested an outsider had forced their way in. The only logical explanations were that Hogan had turned off the system himself or someone with trusted access had done it in his place. The case was handed to federal forensic specialists. The FBI deployed teams in cybercrime and digital analysis, tasked with examining every element of Hogan's security network and smart home setup. These systems retain logs, records of when cameras are switched on or off, when alarms are armed or disarmed, when any change is made. By reconstructing that timeline, investigators hoped to establish who had control of the house in the critical hours before Hogan was found. They also reviewed his smart home devices, thermostats, lighting systems, automated features that can reveal whether someone was moving through a space. In modern homes, these details carry real evidentiary weight. Even something as small as a light switching on or off can help place a person in a specific room at a specific time. Despite all of it, the digital evidence did not deliver a clear answer. The security system had undeniably been disabled, but the records did not reveal who had disabled it. No unauthorized access from outside the house was detected. The data pointed to someone physically present, either Hogan himself or another person who had been there with him. As forensic teams continued working through the electronic evidence, they knew the next step was Hogan's personal communications. The reason behind these unusual findings might not lie in the machines inside his home, but in the conversations he had in the days leading up to his death. The cryptic call that shook Hogan. As investigators mapped Hulk Hogan's final days, one detail emerged that stood apart from everything else. 3 days before his death, late at night, Hogan received a phone call that appeared to disturb him profoundly. Those in the house at the time recalled that it was not what he said during the call that stood out. It was how he looked afterward. His wife, Sky Daly, later told investigators that she had never seen him react that way. Hogan was not someone who showed fear easily. A career built in professional wrestling had required him to manage pressure and project calm in almost every situation. But after he ended that call, she described his expression as one of genuine fear, something she said she had not witnessed in all the time they had been together. He did not explain what had been said. He went quiet, and that silence from a man who was normally vocal and expressive told her something was deeply wrong. Investigators quickly established that the call was not routine. Digital forensic teams attempted to trace its origin, but the trail revealed significant effort to conceal it. The call had been routed through multiple servers across different countries. Each time the investigators followed the signal, it redirected to another point in the chain. Tracing it to a true source proved nearly impossible. This level of complexity was not common. Routing a call through international servers, a technique involving proxies and relay networks, required both technical sophistication and deliberate intention. Whoever placed the call did not want to be found. The FBI considered several possibilities. The call might have been a warning. It might have been connected to extortion, with someone pressing Hogan over private matters. A third possibility involved sensitive information Hogan may have been holding, though no clear evidence supported that theory at the time. What investigators agreed on was that the call was not accidental. It had been planned, hidden, and it had left a visible mark on the man who received it. According to Sky Daly, Hogan said very little during the conversation. He spoke briefly and ended the call. For someone known for being expressive, the brevity suggested that what he heard did not need a response, that he understood immediately what it meant, and that understanding weighed on him. The timing gave it added significance. 3 days before his death, his life had appeared stable. He was recovering from surgery, maintaining his routines, spending time with family. There was nothing in his daily schedule to suggest turmoil. The sudden appearance of a heavily disguised late-night call against that backdrop stood out sharply. The contents of that call remain classified. What is clear is that before it, Hogan was calm and settled. After it, those around him noticed a man who was carrying something he had not carried the day before. Fractured family, broken peace. Behind the brightness of Hulk Hogan's career was a private life defined by tension, disappointment, and complicated relationships. For federal investigators trying to understand whether someone close to him had played any role in his death, his family history became one of the most closely examined areas of the entire investigation. His first marriage to Linda Claridge in 1983 produced 2 2 children, Brooke and Nick, and for years presented the image of a stable American family. The reality television show Hogan Knows Best, which aired in 2005, reinforced that image for millions of viewers. On screen, Hogan was the proud, involved father balancing wrestling fame with home life. The reality was more complicated. In 2007, reports of infidelity surfaced. A woman connected to Brooke claimed a relationship with Hogan, which he denied. The marriage collapsed anyway. Linda filed for divorce that same year, ending 24 years together. The split was public and painful. Accusations came from both sides. Hogan later admitted that during the period that followed, he experienced serious depression and contemplated ending his life. After several difficult years, he remarried Jennifer McDaniel in 2010 in a private ceremony. The marriage lasted more than a decade before ending quietly in 2021. Unlike the first divorce, it drew little public attention, but it added to a pattern. Hogan's personal life rarely found lasting peace. His third marriage came in 2023 to Sky Daly, a yoga instructor. Their relationship moved quickly with an engagement that surprised some of those close to him. But friends who spent time with them noted the change in him. She brought stillness into his life. He described her as his anchor, someone who helped him focus on health and a quieter kind of daily existence. Whatever skepticism surrounded the relationship, those who knew him agreed he appeared genuinely happy in those final years. Not everyone in his family shared that happiness. His daughter Brooke had been absent from the wedding and had kept her distance for some time. Their relationship had been strained for years, damaged by the public scandals that surrounded Hogan's name, including a highly publicized leaked tape. Brooke had chosen to step back from family events, and while she occasionally spoke respectfully of her father in public, the distance between them was visible. That distance became even more significant after his death. Reports revealed that Brooke had been removed from Hogan's will prior to his passing. His son Nick was named sole heir to an estate valued at nearly $5 million. The decision surprised many observers and raised immediate questions about why Brooke had been excluded entirely. Some saw it as a final expression of their estrangement. Others wondered whether it pointed to deeper conflicts that had never been resolved. For investigators, this detail could not be dismissed. Inheritance disputes and financial resentments are regularly considered as potential context in unexpected deaths. While no direct evidence pointed toward foul play within the family, the fact that one child had been completely removed from the will while the other received everything created a threat that needed to be examined. Hogan's history of emotional struggle added another layer. The depression he had openly described during his first divorce, the suicidal thoughts he had admitted to in interviews, these were not ancient history. They were part of who he was, and investigators understood that emotional scars can shape decisions and relationships long after the wounds appear healed. The family dynamics alone could not explain everything the investigation had uncovered. The next layer pointed back to Hogan's body itself and to a surgery performed just weeks before his death. Surgery, rumors, and a fragile body. By the time Hulk Hogan reached his 70s, his body had accumulated a lifetime of damage. He had been one of the most physically demanding performers of his era, carrying enormous opponents, enduring hard landings night after night, traveling relentlessly for decades. Music that existence required more than 24 surgical procedures, including operations on his back, hips, knees, and shoulders. Hogan had spoken openly about the toll, describing back surgeries that left him temporarily unable to walk. Each procedure kept him functioning, but added new layers of vulnerability to a body already stretched past its natural limits. The most significant of those operations came on May 14, 2025, when Hogan underwent a 4-level anterior cervical discectomy and fusion, known medically as ACDF. Surgeons removed damaged discs from the cervical spine and fused adjacent vertebrae to restore stability and relieve pressure on the spinal nerves. A 4-level fusion spans a far greater section of the cervical spine than a standard procedure, carries a longer recovery window, and introduces proportionally greater risk of complications. For a 71-year-old man already living with leukemia and atrial fibrillation, those risks were considerable. Medical specialists note that ACDF across multiple spinal levels can affect the phrenic nerve, the nerve that runs from the cervical spine through the chest and controls the diaphragm. If damaged, a patient can experience sudden respiratory failure without warning. The diaphragm stops contracting, breathing becomes inadequate, and in severe cases, the heart follows. Some accounts after Hogan's death suggested his phrenic nerve may have been compromised during the operation, though this was never officially confirmed. Following the surgery, rumors spread quickly. Radio personality Bubba the Love Sponge told his audience that Hogan was in critical condition and might not survive. His wife, Sky Daly, pushed back directly, stating that he was not in a coma, his heart was strong, and he was making progress. She described the rumors as harmful and inaccurate. She maintained that while the surgery was serious, the trajectory was positive. In the weeks that followed, Hogan appeared to support that account. He was photographed smiling, meeting fans, and returning returning to light workouts at home. One widely shared image showed him posing with supporters outside his Clearwater property, looking alert and upright. His son, Nick, described him as more focused on his health than he had been in years. Those who saw him in person said he seemed determined, even upbeat, not the picture of a man in physical decline. Yet, complications from cervical spine surgery at multiple levels can surface weeks or months after the procedure, often without obvious warning signs. When investigators reviewed the timeline after his death, the question emerged, had the surgery contributed to what happened? If the phrenic nerve had been damaged, his breathing could have failed suddenly, triggering the cardiac arrest the medical examiner documented. A man with pre-existing atrial fibrillation, where the heart already struggles to maintain consistent rhythm, faces compounded risk if oxygen supply drops without warning. That possibility meant his passing was potentially connected not only to natural physical decline, but to a medical intervention that had occurred less than 3 months before his death. Sky Daily has since indicated plans to file a medical malpractice lawsuit, a step that reflects how seriously she takes that possibility. And while that question was still open, investigators made another discovery during a second search of the mansion, one that pulled the investigation in a direction no one had fully anticipated: the secret room in the basement. During the second forensic sweep of Hogan's home, federal agents found something that immediately changed the character of the investigation. Hidden behind what appeared to be an ordinary section of wall in the basement was a concealed room. It was not listed in any property records on file with the county. It was not referenced in any building permit or renovation document that investigators could locate. The entrance had been constructed to blend into the surrounding wall surface with enough precision that only a deliberate search, tapping walls, checking measurements against floor plans, would reveal the discrepancy. There were no handles, hinges, or visible seams on the outer surface. It opened through a mechanism that required specific knowledge of how to trigger it. Reaching it required knowing it was there. Inside, agents found an unexpected level of organization. Files were stacked and labeled with precision, arranged in a way that suggested an established system maintained over time rather than documents hastily stored. The material covered personal communications, financial records, legal correspondence, and medical documentation. Some files referenced business dealings and associates that had not surfaced in earlier stages of the investigation. Most significantly, some documents reportedly carried dates as recent as the day before Hogan's death, indicating the room had been accessed in his final hours, and that whatever he had placed or reviewed there had mattered to him right up until the end. The contents raised immediate questions. Some files were straightforward medical records, financial statements, but others pointed toward something less easily categorized. Folders contained references to contacts and communications that did not align with Hogan's public profile as a retired wrestler living quietly in Clearwater. Some reports, unconfirmed and treated carefully by federal officials, suggested that certain files may have contained information connected to external pressure or potential blackmail. Whether Hogan had been holding that information as protection or whether its existence had made him a target remained an open and deeply unsettling question. The FBI has remained careful about what it has disclosed. Officials confirmed only that the investigation was ongoing and that no conclusion about foul play had been reached. Requests for comment on the specific contents of the room were declined entirely. Their silence opened space for speculation, and coverage quickly spread suggesting that Hogan's private life may have been considerably more complicated than the retired wrestler seeking peace narrative his recent public appearances had implied. For his family, the discovery left a difficult mixture of feelings. They wanted clarity, but the existence of a hidden room filled with organized private files accessed recently and concealed from everyone complicated their understanding of a man they believed they knew. The version of Hogan who had seemed calm, settled, and at peace in his final years now sat alongside a version who had felt it necessary to build and maintain a secret space no one was supposed to find. Those two versions were very difficult to reconcile. A man who had spoken publicly about finding peace, simplifying his life, and focusing on health had simultaneously been maintaining a concealed archive that the people closest to him knew nothing about. And with the contents still largely classified, that reconciliation remained out of reach. The legacy and the lingering shadows. Hulk Hogan's death in 2025 closed one of the most celebrated careers in the history of professional wrestling. For millions of fans, he was more than a performer. He was the defining face of the WWE throughout the 1980s and 1990s. The man who carried the sport into mainstream entertainment and made professional wrestling a household conversation. His famous body slam of Andre the Giant at WrestleMania 3 remains one of the most replayed moments in sports entertainment history. Even people who never followed wrestling recognized him. His presence, his catchphrases, the outsized energy he brought to everything he did. His influence extended well beyond his own era. Performers who came after him, Dwayne Johnson, John Cena, and others have acknowledged that the stage Hogan built made their own careers possible. The global reach image of professional wrestling today connects in a direct line back to what he helped create. The questions surrounding his death, however, have not settled as cleanly as his legacy. The official cause was a heart attack explained by leukemia and atrial fibrillation and the cumulative physical damage of his career. For many, that was sufficient. It matched his medical history, and at 71, his body had earned its fragility. For others, the details that surfaced afterward, the disabled security system, the sterile gym, the classified phone call, the hidden room, created a picture that felt like more than a natural ending. Legal proceedings added another dimension. Sky Daily has indicated plans to file a medical malpractice lawsuit, arguing that the spinal surgery he underwent in May 2025 may have damaged the phrenic nerve and contributed to the respiratory failure that caused his cardiac arrest. No court ruling has yet confirmed that claim, but the possibility of surgical error remains an active part of the broader conversation. His estate, valued at nearly $5 million, went entirely to his son Nick, while his daughter Brooke was excluded. That decision reflected the fractured state of that relationship and attracted scrutiny from those who study the financial dynamics of high-profile deaths. Investigators noted it as relevant context without drawing conclusions. As of the time this story was compiled, the investigation remained open. Police and federal authorities continued reviewing medical and digital records. Family members had been promised a full briefing before any public conclusion was released. The open status kept speculation alive, and every delay added weight to the sense that something had not yet been fully told. For fans, the situation left a difficult balance. On one side, the extraordinary career, the decades of entertainment, the cultural imprint of a man who made professional wrestling matter on a global scale. On the other, the unanswered questions that gathered around his final days, like weather that never fully broke. Did his body simply give out after a lifetime of extraordinary punishment? Did hidden conflicts and pressures accelerate what was already coming? Did a surgery leave a vulnerability that his heart could not survive? Or did that phone call 3 days before his death carry something no investigation has yet been able to name? The truth has not been fully established. What remains is the legacy. Murals on walls in Clearwater, decades of memories shared across the world, and a story that still has not delivered its final line. Hulk Hogan may be gone, but the full account of his last breath has not yet been written. Share your thoughts in the comments because this story is still unfolding.